Saint Menas, the terrifying rider. At difficult times, Christians are strengthened by the Church and her saints, who hurry to everyone that is in need or danger, and calls for their help and protection. Less than 200 years ago, Greece and its neighbouring countries were still occupied by the Ottoman Muslims. Christians were persecuted because of their faith, just like during the times of the idolatrous Roman Empire. They were mocked and assaulted and even killed, unless they paid a special tax required from Jews and Christians, or rejected their faith in Christ, the Son of God. The struggle for freedom lasted many years. Once, the cruel occupying authorities of Crete, the beautiful island in southern Greece, were enraged by the Christians struggling for their freedom. That is why they thought of a brutal and vile plan. They sent the Janissaries, cold-blooded, revered slave soldiers, to slaughter all the Christians participating in the Paschal Divine Liturgy. The liturgy was to be held at the biggest church of the island, in the city of Handakos, today called Heraklion. At this church of the great martyr warrior Saint Menas, all the faithful from the surrounding areas used to get together for the feast of light and of joy, Pascha. Late at night, when the liturgy had already begun, the Janissaries surrounded the church of Saint Menas and waited for the right moment to ambush them. When all the Christians were gathered, they would rush inside and kill everyone. Suddenly, in the narrow alleys of the town, a wind arose. In the beginning, it was as subtle as the whispering of the tree leaves. But it got stronger and stronger by the minute. In no time, it sounded like a disastrous storm, threatening to wipe out anything that stood in its way. It was getting closer and closer. The Janissaries were frightened to move. They stood still, waiting for the danger to pass. While outside, the sky and the earth were trembling and shaking, as if trying to get rid of the hidden Janissaries and their monstrous plan. Inside the church, the divine liturgy continued in a serene and blissful way. The tremor was now really close, and here it was. Something resembling a cloud or fog rushed down into the churchyard and onto the Janissaries. They could clearly see a huge, ghastly horse inside the cloud. The horse's hooves sounded like an earthquake on the stones of the street. But the rider was even more frightening to look at. He was holding an immense, shining sword, his face being stern yet calm. He was ready to hit the Janissaries, who screamed and ran in fear. The rider then put his sword back in the scabbard, got off his horse, and stepped into the church swiftly and silently, so that he would not disturb the priests pronouncing joyfully, "Christ is risen." Some time later, when the Christians had a litany in honor of Saint Menas and brought his icon outside the church, one of the Janissaries saw it and immediately recognized the frightening rider from that astonishing night. He then ran to the other Janissaries and told them about it. They were petrified, realizing that Saint Menas himself had come in person to protect his people. From then on, none of them dared to bully or persecute Christians in, or even close to, the church of Saint Menas. Saint Menas was born in Egypt. He was an experienced officer of the Roman imperial army during the reign of Diocletian, from 284 to 305 AD. When the fierce persecutions of Christians started, he, a Christian himself, voluntarily took off all his military insignia and withdrew to the mountains, where he lived in fasting and prayer. In the year 304, during some major idolatrous festivities, he presented himself to the governor Pyrrhus and bravely confessed his faith in Christ. He was then immediately arrested, tortured, and sentenced to death. Saint Menas is a known wonder worker. One of his greatest miracles, but not widely known, is the divine intervention produced through his intercessions in the battle at El Alamein in Africa, where the Nazis were defeated by the Allies. Commemorated November the 11th, Saint Menas, intercede for us.